Hello, everybody. Good evening. Let's just adjust my color here. It's a little washed out over here. I have not a new camera, but it has new software, and the settings are a little bit wild. Anyway, glad to be here with you. If you are joining me on Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube or Instagram, come say hi in the comments. I would love to make this chat interactive, and I'm really excited about our topic for today, actually. We're going to be talking about, and if you haven't been here before, we're talking about the Forking Audacity. And no, I don't mean forking. I mean the big F word, but I like to keep it, kind of clean on the socials, even though, IRL, there's some cursing involved in my life. But I started this series, the Forking Audacity, because I just hear so many stories all the time of things that happen at work, things that our bosses do, things that entire workplaces do that are just like absolutely freaking audacious, and we just accept it. And it's part of this like fine trap that we get ourselves into. It's part of this pattern that we create of gaslighting ourselves and of wondering, like, am I doing it wrong? Am I the drama? Or is the company the drama? Or is my boss the drama? Or is my sabotaging coworker the drama? And the answer is like, yeah, probably all of the above. But what I want to normalize, and why I'm having these conversations, which I'm having every single Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, except for one Tuesday in February when I have to change the day because of some travel. But every Tuesday, I'm going to talk about a forking audacious topic, something that has happened in your work life or happens in people's work lives that we need to call out. We need to talk about. We need to stop being silent about and stop saying, like, this is fine. This is just how things are. Last week was things your boss says to you that are just like craziness. And I talked a little bit about how to respond to some of that stuff. If you have topic ideas, I want to hear them. So if you have something that you want me to talk about, you can put it in the comments of whatever platform you are watching me on, whether you're watching live or you're in the replay. If you have a topic you want me to talk about, but you don't want to be identified, which is super understandable, send me a DM. Let me know what you want me to talk about. I won't share your name, and I'll be happy to talk about my thoughts on that topic. If you don't know me, and this is our first time interacting, I'm Lauren Lefkowitz. I am an executive coach for corporate people who want to stay in corporate, but are not enjoying it. That there was like a point in time where you thought your corporate career was going to be amazing and the best thing that ever happened to you. And instead of feeling amazing about where you are and all the achievements that you've made, you are feeling stuck or boundaryless or overworked or tired or people-pleasy, and you don't know how to get out of it. And most of you who I'm talking to are the high achievers who are sitting with yourselves and saying, well, I should just be able to do this myself. And hello, I know that, because same, I thought I should be able to do it myself, even though I had been coaching for a whole bunch of years before I got my own coach and realized, oh, look, I'm allowed to ask for help too. So now that you know a little bit about me, again, if you're in the conversation, I welcome you into the chat to let me know what you want me to talk more about, or into my DMs. Okay, so tonight on the Forking Audacity, we are talking about the audacity of those who take credit for our work. And I'm going to give you some details, some things that are generalized enough from client experiences and from my own experience and from colleague experiences about how this happens. And then I'm going to talk about how you might respond to it and or how you can build around that level of toxicity so that you do get credit for your work without, saying like, hey, that was my idea, and feeling like that sort of ickiness about it. So I'll start with me. I have been in situations where throughout my career, when I was in my corporate life, where I came up with some good ideas, got invited into the room, up to the table to brainstorm or strategize or implement or create, you name it. I've probably been in the room where it happened, as Hamilton would say. And all of that is really flattering for a high achiever. It's also can be really overwhelming. And if you're going to be putting in the extra work, if you're working on up-leveling, if you're working on getting recognition, if you're working on getting to the tables that you want to be seated at, or leading the tables that you want to be leading, then reaching out for that work or volunteering or being excited when you are voluntold. If you've never heard that word before, that is having your hand raised for you without you actually doing the hand raising. If you're getting involved in bigger and better and more, and you're not in seats at all of the tables, the potential is for credit to be taken from you. The other potential is to have credit taken from you from a peer. And so some examples that I've had in my career, I have had somebody come to my office and say, hey, your boss, name inserted, but I won't insert it here. Your boss told me that we're going to be implementing a new policy for XYZ, phone reimbursement. Or your boss let me know that we're applying for a new award. That's pretty cool. I'm so glad your boss found that award for us to apply for. And in my brain and my body, the reactivity, because I had thought of that idea, I had created that policy, I had come up with the idea for us to apply for this award, whatever the thing was, because it got taken up the chain to people who had seats at the table. And those people who had the seats at the table weren't necessarily people who gave credit where credit was due. The come around would be casual conversations where people were talking about how great the idea was, but not how great my idea was. And I see this with clients all the time with, I really have to present it as my idea because I'm the senior vice president or I'm the CEO, or the board isn't going to take it well coming from the head of HR. They'll take it better if it comes from the CFO. Whatever the case is, there are, I guess I'm going to call them reasons. Put them in little quotation marks there if you're listening and not watching my face. But I guess we'll call them reasons. There are reasons why you may not get credit up front. I don't actually believe there are reasons. I think that as a leader, there's so much power in giving credit to the people who report to you. There's so much good leadership in saying like, oh yeah, Kate came up with that idea and she's really running with it. And, I'll help her along the way. And if anybody wants to be involved, let me know, or if someone on your team wants to be involved. And there's that facilitation and leadership aspect that if you are a confident leader, you get to have, and you get credit for being Kate's supervisor. But so much more often what we see is the manager taking credit for the idea, for the project, for the work. I have had this with employees in HR, or with clients in HR rather. I've had this with them creating entire performance systems and or doing an entire RFP proposal process for a new applicant tracking system, and really being thoughtful about how it gets put together. And then their boss gets or takes all of the credit and then doesn't pass it on. I've seen it with brand work. I've seen it with contracts work. I've seen it on the legal side. I've seen it in every department, in every stage, in every age of employee, in all genders of employee, in all races of employee, that there are leaders who will simply take credit for your work. There are also peers. And I will say more often than not, the introverted leader will allow the extroverted peer to just like come in and take credit because they don't want to rock the boat. And Michelle, hey, Michelle. Oh, it's so good to see you. Michelle says in the comments on LinkedIn, yes, so much power in giving credit to the person whose idea you're sharing. So true. And so often, if we're not confident leaders, we're afraid that if we give away, again, finger quotes, if we give away credit, that it somehow makes us look weak. So I'm talking to those of you who want to be the kind of confident leader who both gives credit where credit is due, which I will tell you now is an absolute strength. I'm going to talk to you in a moment about the way to talk about that. And also being the confident leader who says, that was my idea and I'm proud of it, without feeling like you're a petulant child who's saying like, no, that was my idea, right? We don't want to sort of have that feeling that we're whining about not being given credit. Yeah, insecurity is a killer for a leader. Who wants to follow an insecure leader? It's true, Michelle. Who wants to follow an insecure leader? And yet, so many of us do, for a number of reasons. We aren't ready to change jobs. We aren't confident in our skills to change jobs. We've been gaslit and toxified. I don't think that's a word, but I just made it up and now it is. In our jobs to think that we don't deserve better. We're afraid we're going to get in trouble. We want to be good kids. We're raised to be good kids. We're raised to be agreeable and, smart, but not show offy. And so the challenge is like, how do I speak up, give credit where credit is due as a leader? And then when somebody else is taking my credit, whether it's that they're passing off my report as their own, whether they're repeating your idea in their words, but they're louder, so the way that they say it gets recognized more. There are ways to handle this. And so I'm going to talk to you first about how to handle this as the leader who is giving credit. Because if you're watching me, you probably already are a leader who's giving credit. And you're probably giving away even more credit than you could be. And so let's imagine you're a vice president, you're a director, you're a CEO, you are managing somebody who has put together a project plan for something amazing. Now, they've done it with your guidance, with your advisory, with your mentorship, but they really took it and ran with it and gave it to you for feedback. You gave them some feedback. They either implemented the feedback as you suggested, or they didn't, and they told you why they didn't want to, and you agreed with them. Or they were graceful if you had to override how they took the feedback. And so were you. And your opportunity then, because you have the seat at whatever particular table you're talking at, you have the opportunity to first determine whether they get to come to whatever that meeting is as a guest. You as a leader, you can create new precedent. Like, oh, the executive team is meeting today. We don't typically have anybody who doesn't have a vice president or more senior title in the room, but our designer put this all together, and that designer is going to explain this way better than I will. So what I'm going to do is give my team the heads up that we're going to have a guest for part of the conversation. Help the executive team determine where on the agenda that fits, so that person can come in at the beginning or at the end or whatever part of the agenda. We stop the meeting. And we allow their presentation in and we coach them so that we can help them be ready to present and ready to answer questions. And we're their backup. If they don't know how to answer a question, if they're not sure, they can turn to us. They can trust us for that. But we're giving them the opportunity for face time at the table that they eventually want to be seated at. Now, not everybody is going to want this. Some people may say like, I don't want to be at your seat at the table. I will tell you how to present this. And I am a doer. I don't want to be in leadership. I want to just do the thing and step out of it. And that's something for you to negotiate with the person who's reporting to you. But one option is you bring them to the meeting. And if another vice president or the CEO says, we don't typically do that, then you get to say, maybe we should. If that's not the option, if the option is you do present it, then you get to say, and Michelle, I'm going to use your name because you came into the comments. I've never worked with Michelle. I just know her and I think she's an amazing person. But Michelle, you have an opportunity to manage a project and your boss is going into the room to present it. You should have the opportunity to talk about how it gets presented. And then your manager should come into that room and say, Michelle put this all together. So if we have questions for her, I'll be happy to bring them back to her. If we have feedback for her, I'll be happy to bring it back to her. And I've been coached by Michelle on how to present this. So I will do the best that I can. And I am like really impressed by how she did this. And I just really want to acknowledge her. I want her name in your head as we're going through this. So as the leader talking about Michelle, who did the project, I'm giving the credit to Michelle. I'm going to be talking about her leadership on the project as we go through. And then I'm going to be bringing feedback to her. So if somebody walks by her office and they say, hey, Michelle, I saw the presentation from your department lead at this meeting. You did an awesome job. Instead of, hey, Michelle, Lauren told me at the meeting that Lauren is working on X, Y, and Z and that you helped her with it. Great job assisting her, right? Two totally different feels. So that's how you handle it from the leadership perspective. From the contributor perspective, when your ideas are getting taken at a meeting, let's talk about like peer-to-peer first. If your ideas are being taken at a meeting, you say, hey, let's paint this wall blue. And the conversation goes on and nobody's really taken your suggestion. And then somebody else comes in, your peer comes in and says, I was thinking we should paint this wall blue right back here. And somebody else hears that. Two things you can do. One, hey, thanks for bringing my idea back up. Or two, saying, I agree with that person. That's why I brought the idea up before. Now, it's not like, hey, that was my idea, but it's, oh, thanks for acknowledging that I had that idea. You can be stronger, and it depends on like how comfortable you are, how often you speak up, how extroverted you are, and introversion and shyness are not the same thing, but they are often correlated. It depends on the room that you're in. If you're the manager of the person whose idea it was, if I said, hey, let's paint this wall blue, and then somebody else came in 10 minutes later and said, hey, let's paint this wall blue, then my peer could speak up. You can find a partner in your organization, someone you're in meetings with a lot, and say like, hey, let's stick up for each other. So that if somebody brings up your idea or takes credit for your idea, your buddy can say like, oh, that was Lauren's idea. Actually, she's been really working on that. And so I wonder if we could hear some more input from her. So there's a buddy system there. There's a standing for yourself system there. When your manager starts taking credit for your work, and I've worked in this environment and I've coached a lot of executives and up and coming executives and emerging leaders in relationship building. So One of the things that happens in our jobs, in our careers, is that we don't want to rock the boat because we don't want to get in trouble. And we think that anything above and beyond what we're doing now will feel like rocking the boat. So the first step is not to take an enormous step, not to walk around the office with your trumpet, blowing your horn and saying like, I did this and I did this, not building a bulletin board outside your cubicle or as your Zoom background and saying like, here are all of my accomplishments. But starting to build relationships with key people, with key coworkers who you can build constructive relationships with. And constructive is such a key word here because you will have in every office, in every company, you will have office commiserators. You will have the gossips and you will have the commiserators. The gossips just want to like get the juice. They just want to hear like, what are you complaining about? What's bad? The commiserators are going to make you feel like what's going on is bad and they're out to get you. And if you already have like a tiny little inkling of that, they're going to heighten that for you. And so the office commiserator is someone who, if you say, oh my gosh, I'm working so many hours recently, the office commiserator is going to say, have you tried calculating by the hour how much you make when you work this many hours and you don't earn any overtime? Because it's bad. That's the office commiserator. The office gossip is going to say, do you know how much everybody else is making here? Because I have asked everybody else. And if you tell me how much you're making, I'll tell you how much they're making. And usually that gossip doesn't actually have all the information. And they'll say like, okay, now that you've told me, I'm going to go find out what everybody else is making. And if you say, what are you making? They'll say like, well, I'll tell you when I find out what everybody else is making. So they're not actually interested in constructive. But if you can find a partner in the office who is somebody that you end up in meetings with a lot, whether that is somebody in your department, whether that's a peer in another department, whether it's somebody you consider a mentor, or whether it's somebody that you mentor, you can say, you know, I notice sometimes when we're in meetings that I'll bring up an idea or I'll talk about a project I'm working on, and the credit just sort of slides to somebody else. And I've noticed it with more than one person. So I'm wondering if we can just keep an eye out for each other. And if you hear somebody talking about something that you know I'm working on, can you just say like, hey, Lauren, I think you're working on that. Do you have any input on that? Or, oh, I saw Lauren's draft of that. It was amazing. Really good work there. So that's one thing, is that you can get a peer or supervisory or someone you supervise without being a gossip about it. From an uplifting, let's lift each other, rising tide lifts all boats, whatever cliche I can come up with. From that perspective, like what is a way that you can look out for other people and they can look out for you so that credit comes where credit is due. The other thing you can do, and this is a little bit of a longer game, and this is something that I work with my clients on. So if this is something you're struggling with, I'm happy to have a strategy call with you. My strategy calls are 30 minutes, totally free, not a lot of pressure. We talk about what's going on and what could be for you, but we don't talk about, well, if you don't do this, you'll never succeed. And if anybody ever tries to sell you anything that way, back off of them, get away. So building relationships is going to help you build credit. And I'll tell you about how I did this at one of the jobs that I had. I was working on a project and two different people came to me and said, your boss told me about this project. And it sounds like your boss is really going to make a difference by working on this project. It's so great that your boss is working with the parent company on this. And it was actually my project that I had been invited into. And I had the opportunity to be in front of people I had not been in front of before. And all of the credit was stripped away because I didn't have the seat at the table. And instead of saying in that moment, instead of saying like, that's weird, I wonder why that my boss would take that credit. instead of coming from the I'm offended and I'm feeling defensive perspective, I figured out how to involve that leadership team on a one-on-one basis in 10-minute interviews for that project to let them know what I was doing, what I was working on, to ask for their input on a couple of specific pieces that would eventually apply to them and their teams, and to tell them, I'm going to update you at the next phase of the project so that you know where we are. What that did for me was that it helped with relationship building that I was already doing. It also helped with a little bit of street cred, because suddenly I wasn't seen as the assistant, which I wasn't. I was at a business partner type of level. And when they were later in meetings about this, they could say, oh, I talked to Lauren about this, and she suggested X, Y, and Z. Is that part moving forward? Or I suggested to her that we include A, B, and C. Is that part moving forward? So that's the longer game, is how do you start building relationships? How do you start building credibility across whatever organization or department or team, depending on your company size, you're working on, so that people recognize you as a leader and a contributor and an idea person, an implementer, whatever it is that you're trying to be recognized as. And that can start with, hey, I'm just trying to get to know some people in the company better. Do you have 10 minutes to just sit down with me and talk a little bit more about your department? And asking some questions. This is an area where ChatGPT can help you. And I am not a huge fan of using AI in practice. But when you are learning to network, and when you're learning to network internally, if you put something into ChatGPT that says, I work for a company in this industry that's this size, and I'm going to be talking to a product manager, what questions can I ask them in a networking call? You're going to get a list of decent questions. Don't use them just willy-nilly. Use your noggin to figure out, like, what do you actually want to know? What's going to be valuable? What language do you speak well enough, right? If you're asking an IT person about whether your ISO requirements are up to date and you don't know what ISO is, and therefore any answer you get is not going to make any sense to you, don't ask that question. But if you can build relationships across your organization and you start to build a reputation as a person who takes questions, a person who asks questions, a person who participates in meetings and updates about projects, then other people start to recognize that you have these ideas, that you have these thoughts, and it gets less and less powerful for your boss to take credit, and people start to see the transparency of your boss taking credit for these things where credit is not due. So if you implement any of this, if you give any of it a try, let me know. If you want to get updates about this live, I'm sending out a 15-minute before it starts email. In the description of this live, there is a link for you to sign up to subscribe to get notifications when I'm going live or when I'm hosting other events. I would love to see you there. Thank you so much for being here. Have an amazing night. I'm so glad I got to be with you, and I'll see you next week. Bye.